Mike's on Mike, a conversation about politics, government, and Jacksonville, with 50-year opinion leaders Mike Hightower, Mike Tolbert, and award-winning broadcaster and longtime political observer Mike Miller.
Welcome to another edition of Mike's on Mike. I'm Mike Miller. Mike Hightower's with me here in the studio. Mike Tolbert is back in his remote studio. We're delighted you're with us today. And, of course, Mike's on Mike brought to you by our friends at the Jacksonville History Center, where Dr. Alan Bliss and our fine donors keep the lights on and the cameras rolling. Today, our Mike's on Mike guest is columnist Nate Monroe, yes, again, whose remarkable writing and his opinions appear in USA Today's network's newspapers across the state of Florida. For years now, of course, we've known Nate as being the Metro columnist for the Times-Union, which is all part of the USA Network, the Today Network, but now he writes about the state of politics in the state of Florida, and there's plenty to cover. Nate, before we get into our political questions, tell us what it's like covering the state versus what it's like covering the city. How has that been different for you?
Well, part of it is I picked up this column in the middle of election season. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of the work has been a bit more kind of reactive. You're more reacting to events than going out in the field and reporting stuff and then writing columns about it, which is a lot of what I did sort of locally. But now, the election's behind us, and so I'm hoping to take a little bit of time to, dig into some issues that are interesting to me, and sort of getting ahead of events instead of, feeling like I'm always needing to react to things. Although we still might be in that posture for a while if Trump keeps depleting the Florida ranks of our geniuses to fill his administration. So
let me follow up real quickly, because you said things that you want to cover. Give us an example of something you really want to dive into when you get the chance.
Well, so an example would be that I think the Public Service Commission is I don't know if I'd say undercovered. It's not like anyone's making a choice not to cover it. It's just the Capitol Press Corps is smaller than it used to be, like all press corps everywhere in the country. Florida Power and Light is expected to ask for a rate increase next year, and that's
this will be the third one.
Yes, and so that would be the kind of thing that I'd like to make sure doesn't get undercovered.
Gotcha, Mr. Tolbert.
I would suspect, Nate, that you are motivated to cover Florida Power and Light asking for a rate increase. I would think you have some personal motivation there. Listen, thanks for coming back and joining us. The day after the presidential election, you wrote a column that was headlined, "Congratulations, America. With Trump's victory, you're all Floridians now." And in that column, you wrote, quote, "Florida was on the ballot Tuesday night in the sagging frame of Donald J. Trump. The nation chose Florida." What did you mean, especially given that you wrote that prior to President-elect Trump making all of these appointments from the state of Florida to fill high-level jobs?
I've been toying with this idea for the last year that Trump and Florida have this kind of really interesting link, in that in a lot of ways Trump is, although a New York resident, of course, long before he was an official Florida resident, I kind of look at Trump as like the most Floridian a person as there ever was. There's this kind of tawdry nature of his personal life and his scandals.
Wait a minute.
The fact that, Florida has a long history of carpetbaggers and interlopers who come here and sort of shape the state more in their image than it shapes them. And, and I also think that this kind of MAGA version of the Republican Party is got a very Florida feel to it. It's kitschy and angry and violent and in kind of all the ways that Florida are. And there's a literal connection. Trump's orbit is surrounded by, Florida characters, some actual, some I would just say are kind of honorary Floridians because they're just bizarre. And so I've been playing around with this idea for a long time. And it clearly was also something that was on the minds of Republicans. When Ron DeSantis ran for president, his campaign was not successful, but his slogan was "Make America Florida." And I actually think, in a kind of ironic way, that slogan, although didn't obviously have much traction at the time with primary voters. Like, I think that that's essentially what's happening. I think that we are going to make America look a lot more like Florida, and I normally would say for better or worse. I think mostly for worse. After these next 4 years, I think America probably will be a bit more like Florida.
Okay.
I think we can spend the whole show just talking
we
about
could.
that.
You're right.
Which I totally disagree with.
Okay.
I don't want to use your adjectives, let alone your adverbs.
Oh, please do.
No, but staying with this Florida theme, which, for the record, I just disagree with a lot of the way that was described. But, when you kind of think about Florida, if we put it back in a local thing, first there's the three Mikes, Susie Wiles, chief of staff, which we've talked about on this show. It did start with that. Now, I will say, for the record, Matt Gaetz is one of the first ones out of the gate. I would be sitting, if we were talking about Matt Gaetz, I'd be sitting in your chair. I had to deal with him for way too many years, and then I dealt with his father. And I don't think anything that you all have written about him that I haven't said. So that, of course, was right out of the gate. I'm not sure how that happened, but Matt Gaetz is Matt Gaetz, and I think karma caught up with him. And as far as the other part, I happen to like the idea that Trump is remaking Florida. We're the third largest state, so I'm sort of happy with what Trump is doing, candidly. And I'm glad that we got people like Susie Wiles there, and I'm really glad that, which we're going to talk about. I like the idea that we went from apples to baseball bats, from Gates to Pam Bondi, which we'll talk about shortly.
Sure. And to unpack my argument a little bit, part of what I mean too is, so if we look at the election in Florida, and if you look at the results and the campaigns around referendum 3 and 4, the constitutional amendments 3 and 4.
That's about Mr. Miller over here.
Yeah, these are the amendments on abortion access and recreational marijuana,
right. Which both won, by the way, just not hitting the 60%.
Yeah, they won a majority support,
which by President Trump was with the marijuana one.
Right.
Yeah.
Just won that for the record.
Tepidly, but he.
Come on, guys.
Yeah.
No.
So, what we saw there was DeSantis deployed the power of the state. He used taxpayer money to campaign against these amendments. He engaged in what was really an unprecedented use of state power, threatened petition organizers with prosecution. He threatened television executives with prosecution for running pro-Amendment 4 ads. I mean, this is crazy stuff. And what I mean when I say that Trump might make America a little bit like Florida is that I think, Florida, we kind of have this odd democracy, but it's kind of not a democracy sort of thing with some of these issues. Voters want to get a constitutional amendment on the ballot, and even if it gets more than 60%, look at what happened to the felon enfranchisement amendment. The legislature, maybe they'll just veto it. There's no real mechanism for them to do it, but they'll just do it, and the courts are stacked, and so the courts are kind of okay with it, and that's what I sort of fear. The country we might be getting into a place where, we have elections, but how is the government going to behave during those elections? What kind of thumb is going to be put on the scale? I mean, again, that's what we've just seen play out in this state, and that's the kind of thing that I worry about. And we could spend the whole show on this. I mean, there's been a lot of admiration in right-wing circles about Viktor Orban and what he's done in Hungary and this kind of illiberal democracy kind of movement, and that's stuff that people around Trump are really interested in. It's something that he and DeSantis share an interest in that way.
If I can just jump in, because with all of those issues you raised about Amendments 3 and 4, let's not forget that one thing which I don't think has still been satisfied yet is whether or not it was legal to use state dollars in order to lobby against a constitutional amendment proposal because he poured money into the Department of Transportation over the idea of driving, under the influence of something. And of course, we know that he did so with Planned Parenthood and all of the other things when it came to the abortion issue. Is that ever going to be resolved? Do you think that will ever?
I mean, the state Supreme Court decided not to do anything when it would have mattered.
Yeah.
So is it illegal? I don't know. It happened, and nobody got in trouble for it.
Yeah. Is it illegal, inappropriate, or is it right? Then that.
Can I go back to Matt Gaetz?
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I want to go back to Matt Gaetz. Nate, before he was named to be the Attorney General, he was rumored to be upcoming candidate for governor of Florida. Now that he's been ejected from the Attorney General's consideration, do you think that will have any impact on his future so far as running for governor? And I see recently that he is now associated with a right-wing television network at 9 o'clock every night, which will give him a primetime audience of MAGA folks. So what do you see as Gaetz's future?
Well, I certainly would not hazard to try to figure out what is in Matt Gaetz's head at any given time. But I would, look, I mean, one of the stories of the Trump era is that no scandal or personal foible is renders one unelectable, right? There's no more shame. For all we know, his rejection as the AG could very well just fuel his interest in running for governor. And I will say, for what it's worth, as much as Matt Gaetz is kind of a dumpster fire in terms of his personal life and his, a lot of the baggage that he brings, Gaetz is not, of all the kind of Trump derivatives that are out there, I actually think Matt Gaetz kind of understands the assignment a bit better than a Marjorie Taylor Greene. I think Matt Gaetz has a talent for political performance. I think he has an ability to kind of read the room. I think he actually kind of understands what sort of right-wing populism is and has a more intuitive feel for that than a DeSantis, for example. And so, I'm not making a prediction or anything, but I am saying that, if he were to run for governor, it's easy to kind of caricature him and write him off. But I actually think he could be, I would say, underestimate him at your own peril.
No question. Anybody in politics and nobody's taught us that better than Tolbert. Never underestimate your political opponent.
Exactly.
But I also don't think that he's going to be the only MAGA person out there. I think you've got the congressman from Southwest Florida. But, again, don't underestimate him. I hope he won't have to call me for a contribution.
Yeah. To put a finer point on this, DeSantis's very early days are often talked about as a time when people were really surprised. He maybe seemed like kind of a moderate on some issues. I mean, Gaetz was around and part of this kind of group of advisors, sort of leading him down that path. I mean, if Gaetz presented himself not just as a MAGA person, but in Floridian terms, if he was, I don't know, maybe pot curious, anti-big sugar, kind of sounded more like an environmentalist.
Yeah,
he's
a lot on the Everglades. He talked a lot about saving the Everglades, and
that's the kind of brand that I think Gaetz would. This idea that insurance reform has been way too sort of corporate friendly, and something like maybe we need to invest in and expand citizens. That's the kind of unorthodox kind of right wing stuff that I think Gaetz for governor sort of campaign would be playing with.
Of course, Gaetz was replaced by former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi, who's been a Trump personal attorney. We know that. After Bondi's appointment, you wrote, in Bondi, Trump found his elusive made-for-television plaintiff's attorney, a person willing to absorb hypocrisy, absurdity, and whatever other effluent to defend the dear leader. What do you really mean by that?
Yeah.
I mean, do you like her or something?
Yeah.
Okay. I think Nate really does need to know, as does the audience.
I can't believe these adjectives. I mean,
Well,
no, go ahead.
Talk about your history, because I think that's important.
Well, I mean, really, I'm trying to think, I was Pam Bondi's 2010, 2014 campaign finance chair. And we are fast friends. And you look at what she did, which was one of the reasons I supported her. I mean, one, Medicaid fraud, which was a big deal, not for Blue Cross, but for Medicaid fraud. What she did on human trafficking, I have a personal friend there's a personal story on that one. And the thing on opioids, but she's my friend. And I get, as a columnist, where you're coming from. But I will tell you, she's my buddy. I just wish that there was a campaign that I could say, I'm there for you, Pam, and I'd help her do what she's got to do. I doubt she's going to call me. I think she's got bigger friends than I am. But she's been my friend since early 2010. Mm-hmm. And I'll take a bullet for her.
Well,
we hope it doesn't come to that.
Yeah, anybody who links arms with sweaty Rudy Giuliani in front of Four Seasons Landscaping is sort of written off in my book. I don't have some personal history with her, so it's fine. But I just think, she's whatever she was, like she's now a goofball and an embarrassing choice. No, embarrassing.
No, she's not. I respectfully disagree. Long ways.
Tolbert, get us out of this. Tolbert, get us out of this.
Let me step in and interrupt this. Let me interrupt this. Actually, the last time I checked, Bondi was still, she had not stopped being a Washington lobbyist for Ballard Partners, and she's representing some of the top firms in the country, many who have cases before the Justice Department. We tend to think, I do at least, tend to think of Ballard Partners as a Tallahassee-based, Jacksonville-connected lobbying firm. We know some folks who work for them. I think Mary Lenny Curry works for them. And they're much bigger than that. They're everywhere. They've got offices all around the world. Tell us, do you see anything wrong with tell us more about the Bondi-Ballard connection, and does it pretend to have any bad stuff around it?
Well, Ballard, much like my original thesis, Florida, writ large, Florida is everywhere now. And that's, in some ways Ballard is like that too. I think there was a time when Ballard was really more a Tallahassee, a much more modest sized firm. But they're national and they're international, and Bondi worked there. And like any lobbyist, she's going to have relationships that when she goes into government are going to be a bit complicated. I think that, to be as fair as possible, it is not unusual for somebody to come into government service, especially on that level, and have potential conflicts that need to be worked out or accounted for. Were the incoming administration not so sort of reckless and in some ways contemptuous of this kind of thing, I wouldn't feel like it would be as much of a problem as I do. I don't think the Trump White House gives a shit about conflicts of interest, and so that gives me some concern. But I think that that's not just true for her, but for almost anybody they're going to bring in. Sorry, Mike.
That's your opinion. I'm on the absolute side. As far as the lobbying thing, you're talking to somebody who's been a lobbyist for, I think of the 4 really careers that I've had, lobbyists. To Mike's point, though, when you kind of think about people come in as attorney general, a lot of them are from very prestigious law firms. Well, having worked for Holland and Knight as a non-lawyer, which is an international law firm, if you are a major partner in that, you got to, in order to be a major partner, you got to have clients. So, I believe that when she comes in, she left in 2018, no longer being Attorney General. I think she did a hell of a job, and her record speaks for herself. So between 2018 and now, she was sought after. So she worked for the law firm. I think she's going to have to work through that. And then I think she's going to have to do what anybody goes into government, as they refer to it as the swamp. So I have full faith in Pam Bondi and the president that they will thread that needle with a great deal of ethics. Period, paragraph.
Okay.
Take it to the bank.
All right. You want to stay on some of the other appointments by Trump?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying everything's perfect. I mean, there's been some oops. I will say that beside Matt's, there was the sheriff from what was it?
Hillsborough
County.
Mm-hmm.
That one, my understanding, nobody's called me. That one was a situation where in the vetting process, I'm not sure the candidate was fully transparent in background. And that was an embarrassment. And if we all heard it.
There was an arrest, was there not, of a pastor?
Of a pastor, and
yes.
In a situation that was just totally contrary to President Trump. But he didn't disclose that. And that is one of those situations that when it was vetted, not only did he, there were two stories. One, he said he withdrew, and then you saw the president say, no, he did withdraw. When I realized what he did, I said, we're getting somebody else. So, but then you also...
I live in Mike, I live in the Hillsborough County market area. And Chronister's handling of that situation with that pastor wasn't something that he needed to disclose. It was not a secret whatsoever. It was covered to the hilt down here. So it was well known. Why the Trump people didn't realize that or know that in advance, I have no idea.
You mean that may not be the most detail-oriented, organized group of? That sounds very out of character. I can't imagine that.
That's all right.
There's no way.
I can. I know where this is going. I can't wait to 2025 when we start seeing results. So that's okay. It's not how you start; it's how you finish up.
A lot of people are waiting for 2025 for other reasons, but that's okay.
The other thing, now, having said all that, let's talk about also someone that has a Jacksonville connection is Senator Marco Rubio.
Right.
And as you all know, some of our good friends, Mike Toller and I, Jay Dimitri, Nancy McGowan, there were a number of people, John Rood.
His brother Mario. His brother Mario is good friends.
But Jay Dimitri, they were, when you think about when he was running against Chris, where his finance and where his basic campaign started was right here in Northeast Florida. So, and I think Marco's going to do an incredible job. Now, the issue is going to come back, which I think we're going to be talking about, is how. And then we've got Congressman Waltz from south of us. So we've got a lot of vacancies, and we got a lot of those to be filled, which will be some by campaigns and some by gubernatorial. So, to your point, going back, Florida is going to be at the epicenter, and that's also because of a lot of the vacancies. Who gets those, who fills them, and how fast do we fill them, because they're all going to have an impact on the state house, on the congressional side, and as far as getting it through the Senate. So my prediction is Pam Bondi and Marco Rubio will go through like a hot knife going through butter. My prediction.
I think you're probably right.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, even
Would you not agree, Mr. Monroe?
Oh, no, I don't. I mean, Senate Republicans will probably. I mean, I think it's a profound indictment on Matt Gaetz that he could not get this group of sycophants to swallow their pride and vote for him, because I think anybody short of Beelzebub, they're just like, all right,
if they had, let me tell you, they could have saved themselves a lot of trouble. They could have just called me. I could have told them about all that.
any world where Marco Rubio is like this, it almost appears like this statesman, like larger than life figure. You're definitely grading on a curve.
Yeah, Marco Rubio was an incredible speaker. He was an incredible speaker.
He is good. He's a very good speaker, very charismatic.
He is charismatic. And let me tell you, he is, and policy, he's a great policy wonk. I thought Jeb was a policy wonk. Marco is an incredible policy wonk. Marco, and he did a book, but he's also one of the, I will tell you, from a public speaker, I have never seen anyone on the stump who can speak as well and be as articulate as Marco Rubio. He'll be an incredible.
Really?
Oh, yes.
The water bottle guy?
Yes, absolutely.
I don't know if I agree with
let me tell you, he is damn good on his feet.
Yep. Well, that brings us now to the governor. Let's talk about this for just a moment. As we tape this, by the way, DeSantis is rumored to be the on-deck circle guy to replace Trump's appointment of Pete Hegseth if he doesn't go through or if he drops out as Secretary of Defense. This is a three-part question for you, Nate. Why do you think, first of all, that Trump seems to have at least put DeSantis and buried that hatchet, at least for the time being?
With the caveat here that DeSantis' circle in particular is like very insular, and I'd be very suspicious of anyone that holds themselves out as knowing for certain what's going on behind the scenes. I mean, my guess is they probably have not buried the hatchet, and I don't, Trump's not really a bury the hatchet kind of guy. Neither is DeSantis, for that matter. I'm a little skeptical that this was some sort of olive branch. I mean, for all we know, Trump might just be toying with DeSantis a little bit. I mean, this might just be a trial balloon they're floating out and highly conceptual. I am personally skeptical that this is all that real. I think that there is a lot of animosity between DeSantis and Trump world. Their personal relationship aside, and I just have a hard time thinking that Trump would place such an enormous amount of power in somebody that I think neither he nor a lot of people around him fully trust.
The second part of this, about this series of questions, has to do with Susie. We also know that there's a great deal of history between Susie and DeSantis as well.
Absolutely.
I could only imagine, I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall when the president-elect goes to Susie and say, by the way, I just thought I would let you know that I'm thinking about putting Ron DeSantis in defense if Hegseth doesn't work. What do you think her reaction would have been if he'd asked her about that or said that to her?
Yeah, I mean,
Or does that go back to the other point that you were making, which is that this might be just a trial balloon?
Yeah, I mean, again, my view is that it was probably more on the spectrum of outcomes. It was probably more a trial balloon than a real idea. Okay. But, Susie could speak for herself on that. We all know that they have a fraught history. I think you guys had Michael Cruz on and probably talked about that.
Yep.
None of that is, a state secret exactly. Again, I just think Trump and people like Susie around Trump, and, she's not the only one. I just think that there would be a real trust deficit there.
Yeah. The final part of this, what about Nunez? I don't think many of us know who Jeanette really is. Can you tell us who the lieutenant governor is who may become governor if DeSantis does go and take a position that if he's offered one?
Yeah, I mean, she's a former member of the state house from Miami. I think she's a little bit of a cipher. I don't know that there has ever been like an overarching theme to her politics other than just pretty standard issue member of the state house. That's kind of how a lot of these house members are. Unless you're the speaker or in line to be the speaker, you kind of just do what you're told. I mean, there's not a lot of opportunity there to be a real trailblazer. So she would probably have an opportunity, were this to happen, she would, I think, have a little bit of a blank slate to kind of build her statewide profile.
Do you have any idea why he chose her to be lieutenant governor?
Well,
I mean, Mike seems bothered. Mike Hightower seems.
No,
I mean, she would be. She was the first female, obviously, lieutenant governor. She's born in Cuba.
Hispanic.
She would be, right. But, I mean, are there other aspects that you know about or have heard about that?
I mean, nothing that's not intuitive. She came from a part of the state that Republicans have been really focused on making electoral gains in and have been successful. And I think that there was probably some thought that she helps balance out the ticket. DeSantis had a very sort of coded as very North Florida, since that's where he, represented in Congress. And so I think it was just all the good gubernatorial tickets try to balance the top and the lieutenant governor pick out a little bit.
And you kind of remember who came in and helped save all that in that gubernatorial election. It was Susie Wiles.
Oh, yeah, no question about it.
And helped all that. So I think Nate talks about an important thing. You cannot second guess President-elect Trump. He has his own agenda.
When did I say that?
I would just say we know he's going to do what he's going to do. Right. He's got 4 years, but I think one of the things that I think that we all need to, it's going to go through his prism, it's loyalty. And
of course.
he and I'm one of those folks. He he got messed over. He got screwed over by a lack of loyalty the first 4 years. And he's not going to allow it to happen the next time. And so I think everything is going to go through. I think everything is going to go through that prism. It's about loyalty.
It is
first and foremost.
Mr. Tolbert?
And if you're going to be the leader of the free world,
I'd like to go. Can I change the subject?
Loyalty is important.
Yep, go ahead, Mike.
Yes, Mike.
Yeah, I want to get away from Trump and go back to DeSantis. Let's play pretend and to say that he is going to be named the Secretary of State. Given the fact that it's been rumored that DeSantis wants his wife, Casey, to run for governor in 2026, do you think he will push the lieutenant governor who will become the governor to name DeSantis' wife as the lieutenant governor?
That's a lot of ifs, and frankly, I mean, this is already a reality. I'm skeptical it's going to come to fruition. I don't know about that. I've heard, as you have, I've heard those rumors for a long time that, Casey DeSantis might be interested in running. I'm kind of on a believe it when I see it sort of view with that. There are going to be a lot of Republicans that I think are interested in taking over after DeSantis. I think that there is, and this isn't even specific to the governor. I mean, I just think 8 years is a long time. I think there probably is some DeSantis fatigue. And I do think that, somebody like a Byron Donalds or, somebody like a Matt Gaetz or with a Gaetz type message, I think is going to have some traction. DeSantis is never really, like so many, he tries to ape this MAGA Trump populism, but he's just not a good messenger for it. And there are people in the Florida Republican Party who I think could articulate that philosophy, such as it is, a lot better than DeSantis could, or than Casey DeSantis would.
Yeah, I totally agree with. Totally agree with what he said on that.
We'll mark that one down.
Yeah, I totally agree on that.
Okay.
What Nate Monroe just said.
Nate, thanks so much once again for coming on with us. We always enjoy it.
Good luck on your beat. You were there with all of us through JEA and all these other things, and no, seriously, Tolbert and I have talked about that. There was probably, if God knows, if we had not had you at the beginning, we've said this. Had you not gone out on a limb and understood what the hell was going on with City Hall and with Zahn, we would have a different story. And you should have gotten the Pulitzer Prize for that. It was one of the most incredible pieces of journalism, unbelievable. And let me tell you, this city owes you a debt of gratitude. What you did, how you did it, and the fact was the tenacity. And the fact was, if we all remember, Florida Power and Light, or the parent company, during all this stuff, had him trailed, watching him trying to find out something. So on that one, I wish you as much success at the state side as you did for us here. Good luck.
Well, thank you, Mike. And when I'm being charged with a thought crime in the next 4 years, you'll bond me out, is what I heard.
I'll give you a good bondsman. How about that?
Okay. All right.
Call me. Put me on speed dial. No, I'm serious. Yeah. I am absolutely serious for what you did. And I wish you luck, because having somebody over there, and we've talked about this, Mike Miller particularly, when you look at the people who now are doing journalism in Florida, there aren't many like you out there. And I wish you well.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Give them hell.
Okay.
Amen.
I always try.
Next week, ladies and gentlemen, we have a very, very special guest. Our friend, Jacksonville's friend, Audrey Moran, is going to be speaking to us about leadership and love, which happened to be the theme of her address when she received a Lifetime Achievement Award from Leadership Jacksonville, which was an event that our producer Scott, along with Mike and I, attended. And you saw a clip from that a couple of weeks ago. We're going to play that for you again next week. So we hope you'll join us. Audrey Moran next week on Mike's on Mike. Meanwhile, thank you for joining us. Thanks again to the Jacksonville History Center for their sponsorship of our program. And catch us next time, if you will, on Facebook, on our website, on any platform where you normally get your podcasts. Take care, and we'll see you again.
Take care.
Bye.
Mike's on Mike with Mike Tolbert, Mike Hightower, and Mike Miller can be found on your favorite podcasting platform, Facebook, and YouTube. Visit the website at mikesonmike.com. Join us next time for more conversation with Mike's on Mike.